Coming up, we learn how Indian gaming is being impacted by artificial intelligence. Longtime political advocate Dick Trudell will be inducted into the National Native American Hall of Fame next month. And we learn how Northwest tribes are using community as a tool to manage climate change. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amadawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start today in Oklahoma, where there is a continuing controversy between the state's governor and tribal leaders. Last week, Governor Kevin Stitt hired a new Native American liaison to represent the state with its 39 tribal nations. His pick, Wes No Fire, is a former member of the Cherokee Tribal Council. In a statement, Stitt called No Fire an ideal choice to build bridges between the governor's office and tribal governments. Previously, No Fire has been outspoken about the challenges following the Supreme Court's McGirt decision, saying that justice should be applied fairly for every Oklahoman, Native and non-Native alike. That statement crossed the line for tribal leaders, including Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr., who weighed in on the ICT Newscast.
I mean, he's attacked the historic McGirt case, which reaffirmed the reservations of the tribes. He tried to destroy our gaming compact. At every turn, Governor Stitt tries to create a world in which tribes don't exist. He really believes it. He now has appointed a Native American liaison who also believes it. And no one has to take my word for it. This is all documented. Wes No Fire, as a council member, was actually against Cherokee sovereignty. He actually declared that Cherokee Nation didn't have the legal authority to operate courts. I mean, those are his words, not mine. He called McGirt, that historic decision that all of Indian country cheered, he called it the biggest threat to Oklahoma. And that's why he's a seated council member. I mean, that's the reason that Governor Stitt appointed him, because they see the world the same way. People shouldn't be confused that this is a Cherokee citizen. He served on our council. Maybe he'll be good in the position. He is wholly unqualified for the position, but worse, he's actually hostile to tribal sovereignty.
No Fire told the Tulsa World that he sees his appointment as an olive branch for tribal citizens. Well, a military officer who killed dozens of Indigenous people during the Guatemalan Civil War has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Retired Colonel Juan Ovay Salazar was convicted of killing 25 Maya Achi people, 17 of which were children. The sentence for the July 1982 massacre was handed down by Judge Walter Mazariegos in Guatemala City in August. More than 40 years ago, during the height of the war, Salazar ordered the killings because of the victims' resistance to joining involuntary militias. 8 other former members of the country's civilian and military forces were acquitted on the grounds that they would have been killed had they not complied. We turn now to Ohio, where work is underway to remove the name of a forest long considered offensive to natives. The U.S. Forest Service is proposing to change the name of the Wayne National Forest to the Buckeye National Forest, according to the service. The move comes in response to long-standing requests from tribal nations. General Anthony Wayne led violent campaigns against Ohio's Indigenous people that drove them from their homelands. The U.S. Forest Service is reviewing public comments on the matter before making a recommendation to the Secretary of Agriculture, who has the authority to change names. In Brazil, the art market is moving closer to Indigenous villages. In recent years, several exhibitions have been held focusing on Indigenous peoples from Brazil and across Latin America. This gives unprecedented visibility to the artists who have historically been erased by gallery owners and museums. The current popularity of Indigenous artists matches efforts seen across Europe to return stolen artifacts, some of which have been on display for centuries. Curators say these efforts have people seeing and connecting with Indigenous art in a different light. The artwork has deep meanings in politics, cosmology, and nature. Because of this, many more international exhibitions are being scheduled all over the world, focusing on Indigenous art. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The Associated Press is reporting that Indigenous communities are facing some of the most severe conditions associated with climate change. But since 2016, people from 70 tribes have been coming together to find innovative ways to connect with each other and to share ideas about how the practice of culture can be a tool to manage the impacts of climate change. ICT's Jack Orleans has this report.
Native people are increasingly finding innovative ways to connect with each other and to find solidarity to combat climate change. Across the country, Indigenous groups are connecting to share stories about a changing climate. Climate camps have propped up to provide a platform for solidarity and a discourse on how to serve the planet. The camps drew inspiration from climate boot camps in the Northwest that weren't Indigenous affiliated. The camps combine climate education along with passing down traditional stories and skills that would usually be more reserved to select members of the tribes, such as basket weaving. The climate camps have occurred almost every year since 2016.
There used to be like a 4 to 6 week period that you could harvest cedar. Now it's down to like 1 week.
The Biden administration has opened up $720 million through the Inflation Reduction Act to help Native American tribes adapt to climate change. However, some say all of these new opportunities have been overwhelming when juggling everything else. Since settlers moved 99% of Native people off their ancestral land, they're now most often in places more prone to the more disastrous effects of the looming climate disaster. These camps have provided a means of community support.
I mean, I've been doing this work for quite a while, and sometimes I feel kind of guilty because I come to get re-energized.
Indigenous tribes in the area have been making headway into preserving the environment, however. The tone at Climate Camp this year was a bit more celebratory. A beach was recently able to expand because of the removal of the dam on the Elwha River. It was impeding a salmon run. The dam had taken decades to dismantle, and now it's finally gone, and the fish are returning to spawn.
Just hearing one tribe coming together and just working hard to, have their salmon run, to get the food back, to have the water. It's just amazing that they're able to use their voices.
It's not all doom and gloom. The Jamestown S'Klallam and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation are competing to see which one can become carbon neutral by 2032. This is how the new community is being discovered at the camp. In Phoenix, Arizona, Jack Orleans, ICT News.
This month, the ICT Newscast was awarded a grant from the National Science Foundation to increase our climate coverage. We will be working in partnership with the PBS NewsHour on upcoming stories that chronicle how climate change is impacting Indigenous communities.
Growing up, I've always wanted to help people. I remember stories of my mom telling me walking down the aisle at the grocery store and just asking people, how are you doing today? As a nurse, we're taught to lay hands, and that's so much healing. A lot of people don't get that loving touch. And as a nurse, Going back to the reservation, I think, man, like how much impact can you make just loving people right? I think for a long time, the Native American people have been fed this lie of you're dependent upon, say, the government. But I would love to create a culture where it's the Native American that says, I'm doing this so that I can make my community better. I'm doing this so that I could bring commerce into my community. I'm doing this so that I can have the resources to help others.
Dick Trudell has a long and storied career working to improve the lives of Native Americans. In 1973, he founded the first of its kind American Indian Lawyer Training Program. He also played a major role in convening tribal leadership forums over the decades. On October 14th, Trudell will be inducted into the National Native American Hall of Fame. ICT's Stuart Huntington sat down with him this spring at his home in the San Francisco Bay Area. He started with asking if Trudell saw a particular opportunity for progress.
I think that, there has to be more conversations in an intergovernmental way with states and local governments. I mean, they have a shared future, and so they've got to find a way to work together and work out their differences. I mean, so they can kind of come up with mutually beneficial solutions to a problem that affects both. It's been a struggle to get state governments in particular to really respect tribal governments, and unfortunately so many of them don't know much about the history, won't take time to understand the history, but tribes are real governments, and their sovereignty means a lot to them. But anyway, so that area, just the concern about intergovernmental relations going forward, it has to be stronger, a better foundation for it. And it's like agreeing to disagree, but to work out your differences.
Sir, is there something that you have seen in your career that gives you hope?
Yes. When I decided to go to law school and got my law degree, and and it had to decide what am I going to do next. There were just a small handful of tribal or Indian attorneys. Fast forward today, as I mentioned earlier, there's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000. So I have hope that, and I'm optimistic, we have many more young Native professionals in different disciplines, medical, business, law, academics, education, or what have you. So that gives me hope that they'll respond to the challenges they face.
Sir, you mentioned that that you thought the Biden administration was doing a good job.
The Biden administration, I think, has really gone out of its way to make sure that tribes have a seat at the table, and I think really starting with a cabinet member, Deb Haaland, and they've made some judicial appointments, which we've really haven't had before. There's beginning to be a few Indians serving as judges in different district courts across the country. The one area we haven't probably seen is much activity that I would like to see is the Department of Justice, because you've got the FBI, you've got other law-related entities, and I don't quite see Indian involvement the way we should be represented. U.S. Marshals, FBI, the different agencies within Department of Justice, U.S. attorneys, and hopefully that's coming. But again, it really turns sometimes on who you know, and politics or politics. And but the Biden administration has done better than anybody. I mean, and I used to think that the Clinton administration started to do a few things, but they didn't go as far as as Biden and Obama as well. I mean, Obama did some good things, but Biden has exceeded what they've done financially and in terms of political appointees.
Sir, I want to ask you, do you have a message? Let's say that there's a senior at Haskell right now. Do you have a message for her, sir?
My word would be to a young person is, expose yourself to as much as you can, because you never know what you really want to do until you've kind of seen things that may attract you or may attract your interest. And we have many more kids in college, and even with the tribes that have the community colleges, so education is critical, and we have a ways to go, but we've come a long ways just in the past 40 years or so. So I remain optimistic, and all it takes is one or two, three people to make a big difference in any given area, and so I think we're at a good place. We have a long ways to go, and obviously future generations are going to experience different challenges.
Anything else you'd like to add, sir?
I think one of the things that I experienced and witnessed was that I think periodically Indian country needs to kind of take stock of itself. And what I mean by that is in the 1970s, there was the American Indian Policy Review Commission. It was established by Congress and mandated to provide a report, after I think its life was 2 years, and the report came shortly after it had completed its 2-year life, so to speak. I think Indian country kind of needs to do something similar to that. They have the resources to do it on their own, but to take stock of where they're at, from a policy standpoint, what needs to be done. And it doesn't have to be exhaustive, but I think that effort should happen. I mean, I had the benefit of participating and witnessing a lot of national meetings where tribal leaders were coming together and were more unified, and because of that, sometimes spoke with one voice, as opposed to politicians just hearing a babble from Indian country. We need this, we need that, we don't like this, we don't like that, what have you. But I think if people can come together and take stock of where they're at and what some of the priorities are going forward, not in an exhaustive way, but certainly looking at topics that need to be addressed or shored up or what have you. And that's not being done right now. There isn't the amount of unity that I would like to see in Indian country that I witnessed in the 70s, the 80s, even the 90s, and we don't seem to come together unless there's a crisis. But I think there needs to be more, kind of coming together, and something that I always enjoyed being a part of. You never know what's going to bubble up. I mean, some real progress can happen, as well as to be educated about each other's issues and priorities, and when and where they can collaborate to make a difference. Collectively, if they were together, they could be a real force economically, not only because of gaming, but some of the other economic things that some of the tribes are doing. Anyway, I have hope that the generations that come will do all right. There'll be challenges, but they're better prepared than we've ever been in terms of younger people who've gone off to college and have degrees and what have you. So time will tell.
Thank you very much, sir, for sitting with us.
Okay, my pleasure.
Starting Tuesday, gaming experts from around the U.S. will travel to Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. That's for the Indian Gaming Association's mid-year convention. ICT's Mark Trahant spoke to Victor Rocha, the conference chairman and president of Victor Strategies.
Welcome. Let's start by talking about the mid-year meeting coming up for the Indian Gaming Association.
It's going to be a great show. We're really excited. When the show was announced, we were a month before G2E, which is a very, very big trade show. And that always creates interesting issues and stuff like that. And so what we did this year, which we hadn't done before, is we decided to wrap the entire show around Foxwoods. And what I mean about that is that, I've always said, in Indian country, we didn't know how successful we could be in gaming until we saw Foxwoods. And they are at a point in their career, and there is more diversification. It's more than a casino. It's a resort. It's beyond that. I mean, they just broke ground for the Great Wolf Lodge. So we've wrapped the entire show around Foxwoods and what they're doing, how they're dealing with their point at this point in time for diversification, for expansions, restaurants and stuff. So they've tossed open their door for us, which is really amazing. We actually have a session on Wednesday, which is about doing business with Foxwoods, how to work with the procurement process, how to adapt your product. So, if you want to know how to do business with Foxwoods, this is the place to come. And for me, it's about, I think, believe the lessons here are valuable all the way across Indian country. You know what I mean? It starts with learning the culture, learning the tribe, how to pronounce their name properly, I think is where we start. And then, what they're looking for in partners, what they're looking for in products. So, we've never done anything like this. So it's really exciting, and they've been incredible and they have an incredible property. So the fact that they're doing it, it's just, and I believe the lessons there for the rest of Indian country, how do you deal with a more competitive marketplace? What does your casino have to do? What do you have to be in this next iteration of tribal gaming? And so Foxwoods is ahead of everybody. They're already at that precipice. And I think there's a lesson for everyone there. The other thing I think that's really important is that, they reformed the NCAI IGA task force. And so you're getting more tribal leaders talking about the issues, talking about the Supreme Courts, back on the offensive again. You know what I mean? Instead of just being reactionary and stuff like that. I think, if anything about the lessons of the pandemic, besides his revenues, has shown that, in this marketplace, it's becoming more and more crowded. You're seeing a lot more shocking attacks on tribal sovereignty. I think that's what the whole Supreme Court stuff was. And I think the tribes have waking up and understand that this is not the time to be complacent. So that's going to be a big part of our show too.
I'd like to change the subject a little bit. I'm really interested in how tribal casinos and enterprises are starting to adapt with generative artificial intelligence. I know this is something you're looking into, so I'm interested to hear your take.
What was interesting about AI when ChatGPT 4 broke, and I think that's when the real enthusiasm surged for it. Before that, AI was an abstract concept. You know what I mean? Artificial intelligence. Okay, what does that mean? Well, now when you have your hands on something like ChatGPT 4, which is very powerful, and now you're seeing, it feels like we're, it's going to change everything in a sense, the way the internet changed everything, the way it's just become so ubiquitous with everything that we do. And remember in the very beginning, it was www, everything, we began every conversation with www for those. And I think with artificial intelligence, I think we're in these early stages, the enthusiasm, but you get all these spams. AI is going to change everything. And, yesterday, Peter Gabriel came out with a new video using artificial intelligence. And for me, he's tapped into it in a smart way. You know what I mean? He doesn't see it as a threat. He sees it as a tool. And I think those of us who are paying attention see it as that. But I think sometimes I'm a little naive and Pollyanna about this stuff too, because when the internet came out, all I saw was that it was a way for me to find truth. And now with artificial, yet it's turned into this disinformation thing. It's the opposite of truth, and I think with artificial intelligence, I think it has the potential to be that dangerous. But I think if you're smart, if you're an early adapter and you understand that it's a tool, it's going to help create better properties, better efficiencies, run their property for tribes that don't have access to a talent pool. You know what I mean? It's really going to be helpful at the very foundational level. And you can just create a better resource off of that foundation. You know what I mean? So a lot of times in reservations, we have these brain drains. You know what I mean? And that was the big thing about tribal gaming. It's going to bring people back to the reservation. And by the way, it has reversed the diaspora. in a lot of ways, like at my reservation. I mean, I used to live in Los Angeles. I now live right next to my reservation. So it has done that purpose. I think it's going to help tribes to create better run properties. You're going to see anything that has a formula, a routine. That's what it's great for. You know what I mean? So you can be doing your accounting better. You can do your analysis better. It's going to help the regulators, and it's going to be phenomenal. You know what? I've looked at what it's done for me already, and I don't even use Google anymore. You know, I use GPT-4 for spell checking now, and I'll use it, you know, because it's, why should I Google something when I can just intelligently ask something to go fetch it for me? You know what I mean? And so I think the worst of using the Googling as a verb is going to be like buggy whip. You know what I mean? So it's already changing it at that level, and it's freaking out Google, who we thought was invaluable for the rest of our lives.
It's always a pleasure. Victor Rocha, thank you.
The Indian Gaming Association's mid-year conference and expo begins September 12th. Sessions range from reinventing the tribal gaming experience to coming regulatory changes. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.